the book that we're teaching on, which is Releasing Your Potential by Miles Monroe. So we're going to be continuing on chapter 4 of how to release your potential, so we can get through this and get started on the next chapter next. Find my place. Shoot. Where was it? Dun, dun, dun. Dun, dun, dun. I have that song in my head right now. Okay. So, we were about halfway through the chapter, and just kind of overview what we were talking about in those other chapters. We were talking about major keys in different areas that you can use to help with different things. We talked about principles that govern your potential. We talked about what God speaks to you. When God speaks to his source is what he creates. We talked about how all things have the same components and essence as the source from which they came, that all things are maintained by the source from which they came, right? And the potential of all things related to the source from which it came. And then we went into other principles that also said everything in life has the potential to fulfill its purpose. And we also talked about how potential is determined and revealed by demands placed on it by its creator. And then we went to keys to releasing your potential, and there were different keys that we talked about last week also. Well, not last week, the week before. And we talked about the first key was that you must know your source, and in that we talked about you must understand who God is and who God was, and why God is your manufacturer and who he is, right? And then we talked about key number 2, that you must understand how you were designed to function. So you must first understand how God designed you to figure out how you're supposed to be functioning in the first place. We talked about in key number 3, you must know your purpose. And that key we talked about when a manufacturer, right, when they propose a certain product or a new product, it has usually a certain purpose on how it's used. So just like how those products have a certain purpose they're used, same for us. God gave us a certain purpose to be used in certain ways. All of us have different skills and abilities, and we're all used in different ways, right? In key number 4, we talked about you must understand your resources. So we talked about how every manufacturer determined the resources that are necessary for certain products, just like us, our resources, our food, and things like that, right? For us to survive, we need to eat food. But just like how our spirit needs to survive, though, and God, we also need God. We need to have a relationship with God and stay in the Word and pray so we can maintain, right, that connection with God, so our spirit can be uplifted and can continue, right? Because when your spirit is being devoured by Satan, right, it makes your soul and your body harder to deal with, because then those things will follow what your spirit feels most of the time. Because when you're not having a good time, or your spirit or your emotions are down, right, you tend to feed off of that source more often. People who are depressed will feed off more depression, because to them, sometimes people just don't know how to get rid of their depression. So when they have depression around them, their depression will feed off that depression and they'll become more depressed, right? So it's the same thing. If we are relying on God as our source, right, the more you are around God, the more you'll feed off God, right? So you have to understand your resources. In key number 5, we talked about you must have the right environment. So whatever environment you're in, like I just said, if you are able to have people who are around you who also love God, right, they're pursuing God, your spirit will feed off their spirit, and you guys will have more and God will uplift both of you at the same time, because the more you guys are in tune with God and the more your spirit is in tune with each other, because you are feeding off each other's spirit, right? Because both of you have that relationship with God, so you're both able to connect. So in the right environment, you're able to connect with those people. If you are in the wrong environment, though, even if you have God in your life, your spirit will still feed off of theirs, because that means what you're doing with your life, the food you eat with them, or whatever activities you do with those people, or whatever environment you're in, if you are around that environment more often, you are more likely to act like the people in that environment than you are to act like someone who loves God. See, if you're around people who will love God, it will uplift you. But if you're around people who don't have a good relationship with God and all they're doing is partying or drinking or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, they're just going out making decisions that honestly aren't necessarily fulfilling or would be helpful for you, you will start to follow that lifestyle also, right? In key number 6, we talked about that you have to work out your potential. So instead of just figuring these out, figuring out the right environment, right? When you figure these things out, you always have to work it though. You can't just say, oh, God, I'm in the right environment, I'm in the right place. I figured out what my purpose is, and so on. That's cool. I'm glad you're in the right environment. I'm glad you're in the right place. I'm glad you found your purpose. I'm glad you figured some things out. But in order for you to find out your purpose and your potential and to actually do it, you have to work it. You can't just let it go by and think, oh, it's just going to happen naturally now because I figured things out. No, you have to work it. You have to put in the effort, right? Because the potential to fulfill its purpose is present while it's there. So just like when we talked about in the example for this key 2 weeks ago, that when a product is made for like a car, for example, when we talked about a car is not meant to just sit around in the driveway, right? It is a product that was made to be able to get you to different places quicker, right? It was meant to bring you from point A to B, or maybe not even point A to B, just to drive around, to even go places or spend time with people or to travel the country, whatever it is you want to use that car for. The car is meant to be driven. Now, if it sits in the driveway all the time, then you have a product that is not being used. So, for your example, you are the product of God, and if you are doing nothing, you aren't doing anything at all that God is planned or purposed for you in the first place. So just like how Adam's potential would have remained locked inside him if he never had God, or God never gave him a job to do. It's the same thing for us. God gave us a purpose, so our potential would always be locked. But if we can find the purpose of what we're supposed to do, then we can unlock that potential that we have. So God gave Adam different jobs, right? Name animals, do other things, and Adam did so. Without that purpose that Adam had in the Bible, he would have had no purpose whatsoever. He would have been sitting in the garden, just eating his apples and going about his day. But God gave him a job and said, do this, so it gave Adam a purpose, right? Now we move on to keys to maximizing your potential, right? And we start off and it says that plants are wonderful to watch. After seeds are buried in the ground, gardeners wait with anticipation for the young shoots to push their way through the soil. Under ideal conditions, most seeds will germinate in a week or two. So although good care is essential during these early weeks of growth, the gardener will not see the full potential of plants until they begin to actually bear fruit. So many times we are initially excited about the glimpses of God give us, or by the glimpses that God has given us, of the potential that He planted within us, right? Sometimes we get those small little glimpses every now and then. In early weeks and months after we invite Jesus into our hearts, we usually spend time worshiping, prayer, Bible study. We may attempt to look beyond our present circumstances to the unseen world of faith. We may seek God's guidance in our daily decisions as we open up ourselves to His plans and purposes for our life. We may appreciate and treasure many things that He showers upon us. We may carefully adjust our surroundings to make them uplifting and positive. We may work to bring our dreams and ideas to completion. But as time passes, the garden of our potential loses its early vitality as we allow circumstances and responsibilities to crowd and choke the imaginations and possibilities that lie hidden within us, right? See, God gave us the unlimited potential to do anything, but even if we progress, even as we go on, the more we learn about different things, right? The longer that early commitment. We want to keep that though. When you first get saved, right, you get excited, you want to learn this, you want to learn that, you're hopping into Bible, right? You're reading your Bible more, trying to figure out where you want to be sometimes, you want to find the right environment, you're praying, you're uplifting God, you're doing all these things, right? When I know it happens, everyone who just starts becoming a Christian, they have that early jump start in their spirit, but you want to be able to keep that constantly. You don't want it to grow away and eventually just be like, yeah, well, I accepted God in my heart. I'm just kind of like living my life and just kind of going about my day, You don't want that kind of Christian life. You want to be able to be happy and excited and fulfilling and always saying, God, give me more, show me more, do more, right? You want to stay in the Word and keep tapping into it, right? Because the more you tap into that wealth that God has in you, right? You'll be able to show this wealth to the world. You'll be able to benefit the world more. But the longer things grow out, your progress tends to start slowing down or even stopping. The following standards that we have for certain things tend to drop, because now, as we had a certain standard when we first became a Christian, that standard starts to go away because we think, well, we have God, we have the Bible, and we do pray sometimes. We're in the Word sometimes. We're worshiping sometimes now, but we still have God, right? No, you want to be keeping God consistent in your life. You want things to consistently be going, right? So we get to key number 1. You must cultivate your potential. So gardeners who are very experienced know that weeds often grow faster than vegetables. So if a gardener goes away for several weeks, he will return to a stunted and sickly vegetable plant that yield little or no fruit. Because even worse, he may find that he has no vegetable plants at all, because the weeds smothered and choked the roots, or the shoots or something like that. So cultivation is necessary for a healthy and productive garden. So the same is true for us, though. You need to cultivate your life carefully to remove the influences and the stimulants that seek to stunt your potential. Anything and everything around you that tends to or can stunt who you are is, even if it can be hard, it could be someone who's your best friend. If they are stunting your growth, if they're making your life the progress you have in your life a lot less than normal just because of the influence they have on you, you might have to cut them off. I'm not saying I'm not pushing toward that, but there are people in your life that you consider close, and does not mean you can't love them. I've said this before. Just because you cut off a person from your life does not mean you still can't show them love. You still can't show them the love of God. You still can't care about them. It does not mean you can't pray for them or be there for them sometimes, but you just can't necessarily keep hanging out with that person so much, or keep them in your life as often as you like, because if they're stunting who you are more than they are uplifting you, they probably shouldn't really be in your life that much, or at all, right? You don't want people who bring you down, because if they end up bringing you down because their own growth is stunted because of the decisions that they make and the things that they do, it's not going to help you at all, especially if you consider that person your best friend. Because, right, when you have someone you consider your best friend, you will tend to listen to them more. You would tend to go to them for more things. You will seek help from them more often when you're going through things, right? And it's the same thing. They will go to you for things. They will come to you for things. So if you are not able to uplift them and change some things sometimes, or if they're still not doing very much of their life even after everything you've tried doing for them, don't waste your time or your life or the potential that you have with friends or people around you, or the environment that's around you that can stunt who you are. You have to seek people who are positive and encouraging. You have to remove yourself from those activities and situations that might encourage you to return to the former life, to the former way you were, to this part of you that wasn't accomplishing anything. Cling to who God is and allow Him to cleanse you of these things. So you have to emerge your potential. So by emerging potential, or much emerging potential, dies for want of cultivation. So in order for you to not stunt who you are, you must uplift yourself with God, but you also must find an environment and people who are uplifting also, right? You will not move forward in the growth that you have in God if you are being stunted by others. And if you let others stunt who you are, or let others kill the potential you have, or kill the possibilities you have, that wouldn't be good. If I had a multi-million-dollar contract for something, and because some friend was like, oh, that seems like a scam or a ripoff, or no, they're probably going to mess up, or like mess you over or something, right? And you believe your friend, even though it was an opportunity that could help you to be successful in your life, But just because your friend thinks it's something that could actually harm you more than can help you, because maybe you'll get money addicted or whatever, or something like that, whatever his opinion may be, right? I'm not saying this multi-million dollar contract is a good thing. Whatever it is, cool. I'm just saying if the chance for something great happened, or you had a chance to accomplish something amazing, but then your friend or whoever says no, that does not sound like a good idea, even though it could be an amazing idea, right? It could be something that could help you grow, and you decide to listen to him, and then you find out months later this someone else got the same opportunity, and now look where they're at. They're way up, they're way up there. They're being their lives very successful. They're figuring things out. They've understood certain things. They've reached areas that you can't reach now, because guess what? You decided to let that friend or environment stop you from pushing on to moving forward, right? Key number 2, you have to guard your potential. So, most gardeners have experienced the frustration and disappointment that occur when rabbits or insects or birds destroy their carefully cultivated plants. Fences, insecticides, scarecrows are some of the many things they use to protect plants. So, just like Satan is trying to destroy your potential, he is always trying to use a multitude of circumstances, attitudes, things, and people to devour your abilities, right? So you'll never see but a small portion of what you can do unless you guard your hidden wealth, right? If you guard that, you're able to, what the? I went to open my Bible app and it started playing. For this reason, totally different part of the Bible. That's not where I'm at right now. I was reading Hebrews this morning. um, but that small portion of what you can do, unless you guard it, that little bit of that hidden potential will never release if you let Satan do what he does, right? Satan comes to steal, kill, and destroy. He's the destroyer, right? So if you allow Satan into your life, that beautiful garden of potential that you have, that hidden potential you have, whatever it is, if you let Satan in your life, that hidden potential will never come out, and your garden will always have roots, right? It's always going to have weeds and these roots growing around your plants and destroying your garden. So the garden that is within you, right, that beautiful garden God has, you are letting it all die when you let Satan come into your life and be negative. So Satan will seep into those environments though too. See, it's not just about cutting off environment. Satan is in those people's lives, destroying their lives because of what's going on in their lives, right? They're not finding anything, they're not seeking anything, they're not fulfilling anything. They're just going about their daily life doing whatever and not really accomplishing much. You best believe Satan probably has some control over their life, right? There's sin, there's temptation, there's something going on in their life that is stunting them from moving on, right? So if Satan is in that environment, it's the same thing. You don't want to be in a Satan environment. You don't want to be in an environment with Satan, right? So, key number 3, you must share your potential though. Potential is given for the benefit of many, not for the benefit of one. See, selfish people will hide ideas. Selfish people will hide things they have, will hide things they want to do. Selfish people will not share what they want or who they are or what they're trying to seek for. So when they don't share their ideas, their thoughts, their actions, right? They can't find other people like them. They can't find like-minded people. They can't find people who love God sometimes either. There are Christians that are at home that aren't going to church or even trying to meet with other Christians, right? So they're not able to engage in environment because they're not sharing their belief. They're so scared of sharing their belief that they're not able to find other people who also love God like they do. So then their potential stays at a certain level or it even drops. You stunt your growth by doing that. So gardening is a shared effort. While gardener tills the ground, plants the seed, and pulls the weed, the plants will not bear fruit unless the bees pollinate the blossoms, right? The sun warms the earth, and the rain enables the soil to release its nutrients. There's a cycle. See, when we plant something, right, into someone else's life, they must have the right environment to engaged to fulfill something. But it's the same thing when you plant something else in someone. You can't just plant it and then let it sit there and do nothing. You have to go. You have to water this person, right? You have to let them find people. It's just like if we were to use that example for things. So just like when we said, gardeners will pull out the weeds, plant the seeds, right? So we planted the seed. We're pulling the weeds out of someone. We're trying to help them out, right? Then we allow other people of the same like mind. So say for the bees, for example, they come to pollinate the blossoms. Say the bees are people. The bees will come who are like-minded also. You put them in the right environment with those bees, right? And then you let some sun into their life, right? You let God shine in their life. You'll start to uplift them, and then you let the rain come down and fulfill them, right? Let the water flow in their life, right? So when you do all these things, that soil, that spirit in them, right, will release, and then they'll share, and then they'll go out, right? Because when you maximize your potential and the potential of billions of people on earth is also a shared effort, right? Because potential is given for the benefit of many, like I said, and not for the benefit of one. So there is much gratification when people write a symphony or a musician writes a song, right? Because when people write music and someone finds that music, right, and they enjoy that music, what? It can be uplifting to their heart and their soul, right? Sometimes even their spirit. Because to them, it's that music is in tune with their mind and they enjoy it. So when they enjoy it, it seeps into them and they're like, man, this is beautiful. This helps me, right? People go to different kinds of music for either happiness or sadness. Going to music for sadness is not necessarily the best thing, but there are people who will go to more sad and depressing music because to them it relates to them, right? So when you look at these different musicians and different things, you want to find people that benefit you, that you can relate with. Now, I'm not saying you should go to someone who's sad. That will not help you at all. Going to sad music does not help either, okay? But you want to find things that are uplifting and fulfilling, just like you want to find people who are the same way. Because God made human beings to live in fellowship. He didn't make us to be isolated or sit in our homes and never talk to anybody. Right? A loveless life that keeps all its accomplishments to itself will soon lose the inspiration for releasing its potential. So if you freely give, or if you give freely all your gifts, aspirations, and abilities, your potential will magnify and maximize, right? Who you are will maximize when you share who you are, when you're open, when you show people how God has done for you, when you show joy, right? Key number 4, it says you must know and understand the laws of limitation. So every experienced gardener knows that there are numerous laws that affect the success and failure of a garden, right? Tender plants wilt in the hot sun when they are planted at noon. Inferior fruit or no fruit results when plants are not watered regularly. So when you're not, regularly in the Word, you aren't allowing your spirit to grow. So just like plants left to the mercy of weeds yield a lesser crop than those that grow in a weed-free environment. So while the gardener is free to ignore those laws, he can ignore it. He can not water the plants. The gardener could not take care of his plants properly and just put the seeds in there, right? He does not have the power to remove the consequences of his actions, though. So you could ignore the law. You could ignore rules. You could ignore what God has to say to you, right? But if you ignore what God says, if you ignore the things that God's trying to do for you, if you ignore the source, if you ignore the word, if you ignore prayer, if you ignore those things, right? It's still not going to take away the consequences of what's going to happen later. What it's going to do to your soul or your spirit or your body even. But see, when you lack food, right? If you don't eat, right? It makes you very hungry throughout the day. There are people who go days without eating because of anorexia or whatever, you know what I mean? There are people who suffer from that. That's because they force themselves not to eat because they choose just not to. Whether they're sick or not, or whatever the case may be, right? It's still, that is horrible. To think about there's something that is given a name to people who don't eat enough and are too small, that's bad. it's not going to help your your health. Obviously won't be good, because you need to be able to eat. As a person, if you don't feed yourself regularly, right, you could either get sick, something could happen, you could cause major headaches or whatever the case may be, right? It stunts who you are. It can make you very unhealthy, or it can even hurt you horribly. But at the same time, when you don't eat good food, it has the same effects. It can hurt your health just the same as not eating anything, right? Because if you're eating unhealthy all the time, it can hurt your heart, right? It can hurt the blood. It can hurt different parts of your system, your lungs. Will not be able to breathe as good sometimes, depending on what certain things you inhale too, right? People who smoke cigarettes, when they smoke too much, it can give them lung cancer. The possibility of it's there. Even if it doesn't give them lung cancer, it still doesn't help their lungs. It makes it harder for them to breathe, right? So it's the same thing. God's given us all the potential to be free to choose what we want to do, but you can't ignore the consequences of certain things. You can't just ignore your own health either. When you ignore certain things, right, it can hurt you, whether it be your body, your soul, or your spirit. So see, when you ignore God, and you're not staying in the Word, and you're not trying to pray or to keep that relationship with God, your spirit tends to feel sick, right? So when your spirit feels sick, what can it do? It can mess with your soul. And your soul is in control of your emotions, right? Your soul is in control of what your mind thinks, the knowledge you have, the things you believe, right? So if your mind is corrupted by the fact that your soul is unhealthy, your soul will become unhealthy too. Then what happens? Your soul will affect the body. So in due process, eventually you're saying, hey, I am letting weeds grow in my spirit. Because I let weeds grow in my spirit, the weeds will eventually grow to my soul. And when it grows to my soul and it corrupts my mind, it will corrupt your way of thinking. So when it corrupts your way of thinking, whether it comes to eating unhealthy, or whether it comes to just not being in the right environment, or maybe you're hurting yourself with words or emotions, or whatever it may be, whatever the case may be, right? The consequences will be there, right? If I chose to not eat food for multiple days just because my emotions took the best of me, right? I was like, oh man, I'm just super depressed. I don't want to do nothing. I don't want to leave my room. Making excuses, right? Being childish. If I sat in my room for days, purposely not eating food just because I'm in a depressive state or I'm sad about something, mentally, you have already ruined something. And along with your mental mind, letting depression overtake you and not letting God help you get through that, or whatever it may be, anxiety or even hatred. Hatred could even lead to corrupting your body too. When you have a mind that is full of hatred or anger, right, that can also tend to stop you from wanting to do things. Because sometimes I've heard it. I've done it myself. I've been so angry at something one time when I woke up in the morning or whatever, or just during my day, I won't do anything. I'm so angry at this certain person or something that I did at myself even. Some people get angry with themselves. They hurt themselves, right? You get so angry at that certain thing, all of a sudden you're just not eating anything. Or you're just like, oh man, I just don't feel like eating anything, right? And it's happened to me multiple times. And when it's happened, I realize I feel horrible. Not my mind or my spirit. My body feels the effects of my hatred. Isn't that crazy? Your emotions do affect your body. So you have to guard your heart, guard your mind, guard your spirit, right? You can't ignore the consequences of just letting certain things seep into your life, because guess what? You may think emotions aren't going to affect your body. It's not true. Your emotions will affect your body because it affects your choices. So if your emotions are not in line with God, if your soul is not in line with your spirit, and your spirit is not in line with God, then you're going to make wrong choices. You're going to be in a wrong environment. You're going to let the environment and your choices affect your body, and then you will not take care of yourself. So you can't be selfish. You can't be self-centered or self-seeking. You must be able to guard your heart and your mind. But while you're guarding your heart and your mind and your spirit, you have to be able to release these things to other people. That's why, in a common sense, right, when we say we have friends that we can seek after when we need advice or just need a support, right? People who are there to help you get through things, it's the same thing. God is there to help you get through those things as well. You don't always have to seek someone else's advice if you really want something to break, right? You want to break a certain habit or break a certain thing, or say, God, I am done dealing with these temptations or these feelings. God says, He can help you get through it, right? God can help you to be who you are called to be and much more. You just have to break off those certain things and be careful, right? Because this potential is all true. God has given us freedom and power to maximize everything we have. So, He has established laws and commandments to protect our potential. He has given freedom to choose either to obey or disobey, right? See, if I backtalked my parents when I was younger, that came with consequences, right? When you don't respect authority, it comes with consequences. It's the same thing. If I were to go now and I walk up to a person who I got no idea if he's dangerous or not, but I decide to be rude to him on purpose just because I'm having a bad day, and then for all I know he pulls out a gun and shoots me. He's in his own environment, he has a horrible, like maybe his lifestyle is not very good either, or he's not saved, whatever the case may be. You know what I mean? I didn't approach the guy in love, right? I didn't approach the guy with any thoughtfulness or kindness. I ended up approaching the guy out of anger, out of hatred, out of emotion, out of whatever it may be, right? I approached this person with no kindness in mind. So because of that, it came with the consequence of something happening to me in due process, right? See, regardless of the person you approach, regardless of the environment you're in, if you can come with love, you can still create influence in those environments or toward those people, right? We've done this many times when we've been in South Carolina. We've approached people, Calvin and I and my parents and other people too that we've been with. We've approached people that they are not, it's not very safe sometimes. You know what I mean? But when you approach with love and God, you let God guide you, right? You can be, you know what I mean? You can actually push on. You can create conversation. You can make their heart open, right? There's so many people out there that they're not open. They don't want to share their heart. They don't want to share their ideas. And it stinks because you know how many people probably have amazing ideas, but because they're too scared to show their idea or to show who they are, to be who they're all called to be, just because of what's happened in their life, the environment they're around, right? Or the people that are constantly telling them that they are nothing. God, that's horrible, man. When you get people that are bashing at other people for saying stuff like that, like they call people nobodies, or you look at people and you say they're worthless. People get called worthless so much they eventually tend to believe they are. That's why you gotta show love. You gotta show God's love to people so you can help them to be free from those things, right? Because God has granted you the power to dream, plan, imagine, right? Which gives you the responsibility to work those imaginations to fruition. So freedom without law results in purposelessness. Freedom without law results in that's a long word, purposelessness, which means no purpose, right? No purpose. So power without responsibility is ineffective. So each requires the other to forestall disaster. So even with all these things, like we talked about, right? You have to guard your heart, guard your mind. And I'll just briefly go over these keys. Like we said, when we talked about the principles that govern potential, we talked about what God speaks to is the source for what He creates. So God speaks to us, right? He made us in His image. He created us. So all things have the same components and essence as the source from which they came, just like we talked about how animals, right, came from dirt. When they die, they go back to the dirt, right? If you were to plant an animal's body in the dirt, it will eventually just decay, right? So that's the source it came from. Same thing for plants. Seeds. When you plant a seed, a plant comes from the dirt originally, plant goes back to the dirt. All things must be maintained by the source from which they came. The potential of all things related to the source from which it did came, right? So if the potential of dirt is to only grow those things, then that's the potential that it has, right? And the things related to that source will go back to that source and only grow to that potential also. So since we were made to be just like God, right, we have unlimited potential to be anything we want to be. Just like the Tower of Babel, God realized, he was like, oh my gosh, these people have understood the potential they have. And he's like, but I need to cut that off because clearly they think that they are higher than they really are. They are starting to think they are gods because they're trying to reach the heavens, right? When they built the Tower of Babel, what was their goal? They wanted to reach the heavens. They wanted to be higher than anyone could possibly be. They wanted to be greater than God. That was the purpose, right? But God made us to have that kind of potential. They just understood it without God. Now imagine how much we could do if we understood it with God, right? The influence that we could have on the world could be amazing if we just understood how great God is and the potential that he has in us. Everything in life has potential to fulfill its purpose, and potential is determined and revealed by the demands placed on its creator. God placed a demand on our lives, and we just have to fulfill it, right? When we talked about the key to releasing that potential, though, we said you must know your source, you must understand how you were designed, you must know your purpose, you must understand your resources, you must have the right environment, and you must work it out. So once you know your source, you understand how you were designed. Once you know your purpose, once you understand the resources you have, once you have the right environment, right, you must work it out. And then the last thing was, these are the key principles. We did come from God. God, right, made us to be just like him. So you must share the nature. We all share the nature and essence of who God is. You will die unless you remain attached to God. If you do not remain attached to God, your spirit, your soul, and your body will just die off. Your potential is determined by God's potential, and God is unlimited, right? He has unlimited potential to do anything. God gave you the ability to fulfill your potential, and you can do what God demands of you because he would not require it if you had not built the power to perform it into you already. See, the demand that God places on you, right, means that it's already within your power to be able to do that in the first place. So I'm going to go ahead and pray. Thank you, Jesus, for this beautiful morning. Thank you for being able to be here with us, Lord. I pray that these keys and these principles that we are learning, that we're figuring out, that we understand, and that we start to know who we are, that the purpose that we have been given, that the demand that's placed on us, that we just fulfill the purpose, that we become who you call us to be, that we are made to be like you, God. We understand this. So I pray that everyone who is watching, everyone here just comes to realize how great and powerful you are and how much more you can do through us, God. Amen. We're doing chapter 5 next week, releasing your potential. Yeah, well, yeah, it's my